So now I'm introducing a man who's become a good friend of mine in the last few months, Mr. Tom Newmark. He's got a beautiful farm in Costa Rica I got to visit recently, and it's beautiful and amazing. And so he's going to talk a little about the work that they're doing both at Finca Luna Nueva and the Carbon Underground. So we are all set up.
Thank you. If I use this. Good morning, everyone. Really a pleasure to be here with you. It is great to speak to you today from San Francisco, where the local airport was built from reclaimed wetlands and is only about 10 feet above current sea level. And the last time that the atmosphere of the Earth had as much CO2 in it as today, hippos were swimming in the swamps of London, and the oceans were 8 meters higher, which means that when you go to the airport tonight or tomorrow, this is what it might look like. Now, we obviously have to do something to prevent that, if for no other reason than we have planes to catch at the end of the conference. But before I talk to you about what we can do to prevent that global catastrophe, I thought I'd play you a little sweet, happy, uplifting, 1 minute long movie just to get us in a more hopeful spirit. Last week, Pope Francis was here in the United States, and he spoke about many things of spiritual consequence, including climate change. And the Carbon Underground was invited to speak at the event surrounding his visit, and we created a little video, which we've been told that the Vatican has requested. Hopefully they're not about to sue us. But here is what we played for the Pope.
They kiss it because it's perfect. They kiss it because it can feed us and shelter us and even save us from climate change. In its perfect design, the Earth uses the soil to draw down carbon from the air to feed us and keep the planet healthy, even man-made carbon. But with billions of acres of soil harmed by chemicals, that process is stopped, trapping that carbon in the air and causing our climate to change. If we restore the soil, it will once again take that carbon back from the air and put it back underground, back where it belongs, back where it was meant to be.
Isn't that nice? I want to give credit to the co-founder of the Carbon Underground, my dear friend Larry Copold, whose voice you heard and who created that. Larry and I also, about a year ago, had dinner with the then leader of Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. And I can remember the conversation when I asked, well, if we could wave a magic wand and tomorrow all emissions everywhere on the planet from all fossil fuel sources were to stop, which of course will never happen, what would happen to climate change? Would it have an effect? And the answer was none. It's baked in. And then a few months later, I had a conversation with a senior advisor to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And this advisor focused on climate action and finance. And I asked him if all fossil fuel emissions in the United States would stop, would that have an effect on climate change? And his answer was none. Did you all know that? Stopping all fossil fuel emissions worldwide instantly by waving a magic wand would not have an effect on climate change because it's already baked in. And I found this interesting. In May of this year in the San Francisco Chronicle, a doctorate from Stanford, a professor at Berkeley, a White House advisor, says it's happening, climate change, faster than we thought, not more slowly. We have less time than we thought to respond to it. The world is not even fully experiencing the result of emissions put into the atmosphere years ago, climate lag. It will take decades to turn both systems around. If we stopped emitting all fossil fuel emissions today, the temperature would still coast up for decades. And then here in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States, a senior scientist from NOAA writes, "The severity of damaging human-induced climate change depends not only on the magnitude of the change, but also on the potential for irreversibility. This paper shows that the climate change that takes place due to increases in carbon dioxide concentration is largely irreversible for 1,000 years after emissions stop." That's not a time frame that I am comfortable with. And as a consequence, as we face the negotiations in Paris in December at the Paris COP, the Conference of Parties, one of the people leading the diplomacy on climate change writes that we really need a big stick. That was the headline in the New York Times. Climate deal badly needs a big stick. And what's been proposed, he said, they seem like thin threads on which to hang the Earth's future. And when you add all of this up, even in my wildest dreams, we're not going to solve the problem. Isn't that a grim assessment? It's so grim that I think we need a joke. It's the morning, and I feel a responsibility to provide some humor. Did you hear the one about the 400-pound morbidly obese, it's a really funny joke, morbidly obese patient, barely can get out of bed, heart problems and diabetes, and can't work and can't breathe and can't function, and the patient goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, I'm dying. I can't function. I have no joy in life. What can I do?" And this world-famous doctor, who's a specialist in these matters, carefully assesses the person's health and then says with gravity, "I'm going to put you on a diet that will enable you to not gain any more weight." And that's what our climate leaders are suggesting, a diet that will allow us to stay at 400 parts per million and not put on any more weight, even though the world is already morbidly obese with CO2 contamination in the atmosphere. And some of you know, another joke, some of you know Professor Tom Garreau. And in 1990, he used a different metaphor, different, not so funny, a little bit unpleasant joke to describe the same problem. Imagine a family living, a growing family, a vigorous family. The family eats well. The family, as a consequence of eating well, produces, human stuff that they put into their septic system. And the family keeps growing and eating and producing this human stuff, and the septic system can't handle it. And they call in the engineers, the best engineers in the world, help us fix this problem. And the engineers say, well, stop producing human stuff. And that's where we are. That's where the world's best scientists and best engineers are. So while we are working only on the carbon dioxide supply side, we are not going to fix the climate problem. We already have hundreds of billions of tons of legacy CO2 already in the atmosphere, and decarbonizing the economy, no matter how successful, will not deal with legacy CO2. And that's pretty grim, right? So I think we need to go back to the movies. A little comic relief. I got a great movie I want to recommend to all of you, Cowspiracy. Cowspiracy, he says, are you serious? Well, I'm not only a regenerative organic farmer and an incipient novice holistic livestock grazer, but I am chairperson of the Greenpeace Fund of the United States. So I'm that guy. I'm the environmental activist with a brand new dairy herd. And I've been therefore indignant twice over at the utter nonsense of this movie. But let me offer up my own somewhat critical self-assessment that is harsh about the environmental movement. It is now time for green groups to stop focusing exclusively on the supply side of carbon dioxide. It's not working. It's misleading. It actually creates either a false sense of hope or it puts someone into crashing, irretrievable despair. I personally think that theme worked in the early days of the environmental movement in the 1970s, but it's lost traction. And by the way, these views are my own. The environmental movement today needs to marry the food movement. It needs to marry the regenerative agriculture, holistic management movement, and their love child will be a healthy planet. And that marriage is happening. And I'm deeply embedded in the environmental movement, and I love Greenpeace, and I love what so many environmental big green organizations are doing, and I can attest to the sincerity of the fledgling embrace from environmental activists. And we've had many serious discussions with environmental leaders. And what time are you holding up for me? 10 minutes. Okay. It's not yet where we need to be, but we see lots of positive signs. So I'm going to make an abrupt transition to a topic that is very near and dear to the Savory Institute and to all of you, and it's water. And a few years ago, my daughter and I were in India meeting with spice farmers. And while we were in India meeting with spice farmers, we saw the end of the movie. We saw what it looks like after conventional agriculture does its horrible mischief on the land. And this is what it looks like. This is, of course, a lake near the village where we were buying spices. And then a year ago in Costa Rica, there was an uncommon drought in the middle of the rainforest. And this is what conventional field of cassava or yucca looked like during the drought. And why? Why did that pond disappear in India? Why did that field in Costa Rica utterly collapse during a drought? And the answer I got when I posed that question to Dr. Chris Nichols, the chief scientist at the Rodale Institute, is one that we all appreciate. We don't have a water shortage, she said. We have a shortage of carbon in the soil. But where did that carbon go? I recommend that you read a report created by the United Nations Commission on Trade and Development in September of 2013 called Wake Up Before It's Too Late. And in that report, an organization, an NGO called GRAIN, wrote, answering where did that carbon go, at least 200 to 300 billion tons of CO2 have been released to the atmosphere due to the global destruction of soil organic matter. In other words, 25 to 40% of the current excess of CO2 in the atmosphere resulted from the destruction of soils and their organic matter. Let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, when you are at environmental gatherings, almost no one knows this, that so much of the problem of CO2 contamination of the atmosphere is because of agricultural malpractice. So is there an easy answer? Can we grow more food, enjoy greater resilience in the face of drought, at the same time have our food be more plentiful, nutritious, and inexpensive? Can we be climate smart? Yes. According to Big Ag, the answer lies in GMO climate smart technology. Oh, wait, please. Let's have a forgiving, open mind here. Big Ag, what could go wrong? I mean, really, they have our best interests at stake. They'll just use glyphosate to control weeds, eliminate the need to till the soil, put carbon back in the soil, which is the magic of GMO technology and those amazing herbicides, and what a story it is, except it doesn't work. So whenever you hear the term climate smart coming from the mouth of a public relations spokesperson for Big Ag, remember that climate smart from the vantage point of industrial, destructive, extractive agriculture does not work. And I know this because in Nature, a prominent scientific journal last year, a meta-analysis of multiple sites around the world concluded no-till fields achieved with chemical application, achieved with herbicides, does not sequester more carbon than plowed fields. So if GMOs and chemical herbicides are not the answer, what is? It's called regenerative organic agriculture, which is shaped by the visionary Robert Rodale, the son of the founder of the Rodale Institute. So do you remember this from India? I should tell you that over there on the left is conventional corn during a drought, and on the right is the regenerative organic corn in the same field in the Lehigh Valley during a drought year. And do you remember this from India? The end result of conventional agriculture. While on that same trip in a neighboring village, the use of regenerative organic agriculture restored ponds and revived paddy rice production. And remember this scene from Costa Rica, the cassava field during the drought year? I took that picture and I pivoted and I just looked at the site immediately next to it, 10 meters away, a photo of regenerative organic agriculture, the same farmers, the same starting soil, the same sun, the same water, the same vegetative material for propagation, and regenerative organic agriculture during a drought looked like this. So, conventional, organic. So who's going to feed the world? These farmers or these farmers? And why does regenerative organic agriculture achieve this miracle? Why is it that plants are more resilient during climate extremes? Because regenerative organic agriculture sequesters massive amounts of carbon in the soil. Is the carbon stable? You bet. Stephen Applebaum, Applied Ecological Services, and I'll be happy to share this with you, shared with me that the carbon that you all are putting into the soil and that your forebears put into the soil, or that our genetic ancestors and the biological history of North America put in the soil, is resident there in a stable fashion for tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and sometimes for millions of years. So let's really think big. Christine Jones recently in Costa Rica at Earth University reflected on her study of Colin Seise's farm in Australia. How many minutes there? 3 minutes. I'll do this. And I think this is a fantastic summary of how regenerative organic agriculture can reverse climate change. She put up the data from that ranch, and I applaud you for the work. I don't know if you're in the room, Colin, but I applaud you for the remarkable success of your fields. And there were 9 tons of carbon per hectare per year. And there are 3.5 billion hectares of grasslands in the world. So she did the math and comes up with 31.5 gigatons of carbon times 10 years, 315 gigatons being sequestered. And remembering that for every part per million in the atmosphere, you'll have to actually sequester 2 billion tons of carbon. So doing the math, we can actually, using just the holistic management of grasslands, get back to pre-industrial levels. Now, is it going to happen that overnight 100% of all grasslands in the world will start becoming artisans of the grasslands? No. But there are 1.5 billion hectares of farmland. There are forests to protect and to reforest. There are wetlands to reestablish and to expand. The question that we have to ask ourselves at the end of the day, how much net CO2 did we sequester? That's the scorecard on which we will all be judged. That is the existential challenge for humanity. And do you remember this headline from the New York Times? The climate deal badly needs a big stick. I have a different perspective. I believe a big stick is not the answer. I think it's artisans of the grasslands and regenerative organic farmers that we need, and together we can reverse climate change and save this planet. Thank you.